Welcome to the Building Web 3 podcast. I have my good friend Jack. He is the head of BD at Symmio. Before we get too deep into Symmio, talk to us a little bit about how you got into the world of Web3.
Yeah, hey Jax, thanks for having me on. So I've been working full-time in crypto since 2016. I got my start doing community building and marketing at a project called Keep Network. Keep is now Threshold, building TBTC. And yeah, that was the golden age of ICOs. So, we started off with a small community of about 200 people, and like a month or two, it grew to about 20,000. So, it was a pretty crazy experience. It was super fun. After Keep, though, I moved on to fiat on ramping. So, how do you process from fiat to crypto on ramping? I worked at a company called Wire. They were like one of the first major crypto on ramps in the space, and worked with pretty much every major DeFi protocol. We had great distribution. That company was a pretty crazy ride. And actually, at the end there, it was going to be the largest acquisition in the crypto space at $1.3 billion by another payment company called Bolt, but the funding fell through at the end, unfortunately. And so I'd spent the last 5 years really in that payment space. I really enjoyed, working in payments, because at the end of the day, cryptocurrency is money, right? So it just like makes sense that we're going to work on bridging from traditional money to crypto money. But after spending time doing that, I kind of wanted to dive back into deep crypto, get back in, on the ground floor, working with some, just kind of like a small startup or anyone working on a pretty interesting problem. And that's when I came across Symmio. And when I found Symmio, it was kind of just like an aha moment. And that was a similar moment that I had at Keep Network. They like what they were working on was just something new, something novel. It seemed like it could be a really big deal. And so when I found Symmio, it was kind of like, yeah, again, just like a big aha moment. Like this is going to be the future of perps or derivatives on crypto, and I definitely got to be a part of it. So I joined Symmio maybe it was in April, so just a few months ago, but I've been diving in deep, doing everything BD, operations, marketing, helping out wherever I can.
Absolutely. Well, first let's talk a little bit about like Symmio and what they're bringing. Like, what's the specific challenge in DeFi they're hoping to solve?
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at perpetuals, right, or futures within crypto, only about 2% of futures volume happens on chain, right? The other 98% is happening on centralized exchanges. When we look at DEXs, like at spot trading, right, DEXs take up about 10%. So, I mean, there's obviously like a lot of room for perpetuals to catch up. And so it just, and it was a novel new system in the way that they're using intents. They're addressing some of the key challenges that other on-chain perpetual exchanges face. So it was just, it just seemed like a great idea and a great way to go.
Yeah, so let's walk through a little bit. Like, let's say a user's never heard of Symmio. How would they, use it? Is it like walk us through kind of like the life of a transaction on Symmio?
Yeah, so I mean, we can talk a little bit about how Symmio is like architected, right? So Symmio itself and our company, we work on the protocol. So Symmio builds the smart contracts, we maintain the smart contracts, but that's all we do as a company. And then we have two other components to this. We have our front ends, so our partners like IntentX or pair trading. You had Huff on here a few weeks ago. Those are, like the graphical user interfaces for traders to come in and interact with the Symmio protocol. And then on the other side, we have our solvers or market makers. And those are entities that are providing the different markets. So they stream markets to the front ends of the different, contracts that they want to offer traders. So for someone that wants to use it, they would go to a front end like Pair and IntentX. They would select which chain they want to be on. We're on BNB, Base, Arbitrum, Mantle. I think that's it right now. Mode as well. So they'd pick their chain, and then they, whatever token they want to trade. A great thing about Symmio is we offer right now basically everything on Binance futures, so over 270 different pairs, which kind of blows everyone else out of the water in the on-chain perp space. So they'd select which token they want to long or short. And then they would basically, make a request for a quote. So they would say, hey, I want to long Bitcoin at this margin. And then that's sent to the solvers, and the solvers would see the order, and then they would accept it.
All right. So okay, this is quite interesting. It kind of reminds me a bit of synthetics, but they don't really use intents as I know it. So talk to us a little bit, because I don't think we've done too many intense episodes. Maybe people can go back to the Enzo episode. They can go back to the episode with, I believe, Mantra. But talk to us a little bit about. Oh no, sorry, I think it was Mantis. Talk to us a little bit about intents, how those work, and like what's essentially how an intent works in the Symmio system.
Yeah. So, how we currently, or how people have interacted with blockchain since the beginning is you send a transaction, right? And transactions are very rigid. When we interact with smart contracts, we're defining all the parameters within our transaction, and then we commit it to the blockchain. And that can it introduces MEV, right? Those orders can be front run, and they can be outbid, or just basically it's a very strict set of rules when we send a transaction, and the smart contract has to follow that. I mean, that's the amazing thing about smart contracts and blockchain is it's immutable. It's got to follow the rules, right? But intents, right, instead of sending a transaction, we're just signing a message. So there's no gas commitment here, right? We're really just signing a message with our intent, or the end action, or the end result that we want to achieve. So, we've seen kind of a big increase in intents with spot trading. So CowSwap, Uniswap X, right? Those are intent-based spot platforms. So the user comes in, they say, hey, I want to, rather than going to Uniswap where they log on and they swap USD to Ether, and they send that out to the blockchain to mine that transaction. With intents, they're really just what they're doing is they're just signing, hey, I want to swap USD to Ethereum, and then they send that message out, and then those third-party solvers compete with each other to find the best way to execute it. So rather than having to have this concrete defined way of interacting with a smart contract, we're outsourcing the work to a third party to find the best way to achieve our end result.
Yeah, I'll add some additional color on this. So essentially, what's happening is there's like two states being designed, and if people are unfamiliar with the term state, it's like, hey, I have 100, Bitcoin, but I actually would want to take 50% of that Bitcoin and actually stake in Lido. So the solver network will figure out how to take that Bitcoin, do all the cross chain stuff, liquidate it, and then stake Ethereum in Lido. So I only really need to specify my goal. It's kind of like the difference between being like, I want to go to Thailand. It's like, I want to go on Thailand from Virgin Airlines, stay in this hotel, do this, that, and the other thing. You really just outsource that all to the solver. Is that like a decent explanation?
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great analogy, right? Yeah, you're leaving it up, but but at the end of the day, so your travel agents, right, have to compete to give you the best itinerary or the best price, right? Because you're not just going to accept whoever because they could rip you off. The whole point here is that these different solvers are competing with each other to get you the best deal on your transaction or your trip to Thailand.
And then now, who's doing the choosing of the travel agent? If we're sticking with this analogy, is it Pair Protocol is doing it, or is it the end user that's seeing all of the options in the graphical user interface? How does this all kind of manifest?
Yeah, it's the trader, right? So the trader, again, the solvers are streaming their quotes, right? So the user inputs what they want. And then the solvers return, their different parameters for the trade. So the trader would get to see who has a lower fee, who has a lower margin rate, who's going to require a lower, amount of collateral. And so the trader actually gets to make that decision.
And then are you guys maintaining the decentralized solver network yourselves? Is this something that Sim is running, or is this another company that it's an integration point?
Yeah, so Sim, we maintain the contracts, right? And the contracts are really simple, and I think that's kind of the beauty about Symmio here, is that when we're entering a trade, there's no swap happening, right? So like one of our taglines is trade exposure, not tokens, right? And so what's happening is that when the trader, sends out what they want for a trade and the solver accepts, the only thing that is happening is that both parties are locking collateral USDC or USDT in a smart contract that's watched by an oracle. That's the only thing that happens on chain. And then everything else, right? The solver is hedging themselves on a centralized exchange of their choice. And then there's an oracle that is basically watching that trade that either party could call in case of a liquidation.
Mm-hmm. So now if we walk through the life of a transaction, I guess from the sim perspective. So let's say we've got a user on pair. They're looking to do a pair swap. And then what essentially they put in the transaction they'd like to do. It gets sent through the solver network, and then the solver network is streaming the potential options for trades that they can actually execute.
Correct. Yep. So, I mean, currently there's only one solver on pair. It's pretty new, but there'll be additional solvers coming to pair, and so then those they will compete for the best execution of that trade.
Mm-hmm. And then is there like a specific type of trading, or is it relatively broad, the types of trading you guys facilitate?
I mean, just right now, it's just perpetuals,
Mm-hmm.
so just perps. But options are in the work. We're working on some interesting things around meme coins, but we can talk about that a little later down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk to us a little bit about like what kinds of traders. Is this like high frequency trading firms? Is this more like retail users that are using like the front ends that eventually filter down to your guys' contracts?
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of whales. So we see a lot of big traders coming in, and I think part of that's due to Symmio's capital efficiency. Last night I was looking over Hyperliquid. So in the space, everything's about narratives, right? Like that's what crypto's about. It's about trading the narrative. So recently, Radiant Capital was hacked, and so if we're going to trade a narrative, we're going to go short Radiant, right? So I looked at Hyperliquid. Hyperliquid has $928,000 open interest. I mean, this is a long tail kind of obscure asset, right? But and Hyperliquid's known for their open interest. I think they have $1.2 billion. But when it comes to these long tail assets, they aren't as capital efficient as Symmio. So they have just under $1 million, whereas Symmio, we have close to $3.5 million in open interest for these long tail assets. So the capital efficiency, the ability to to basically do do large amount of trades on a very small amount of capital leads us to be really efficient.
Yeah, it's quite it's quite interesting. I'm not too deep in. I'm not a trader myself, so it's always like from the third party. I'm like, oh, this is quite interesting. Now, I'll need you. I'm going to ask this question. I need you to explain some of the pieces of it for the audience because it's probably more on the complex side. So, how does Sim achieve decentralized bilateral OTC trading without pre-locked liquidity? And I'm going to need you to explain to the audience what that means, and then answer the question.
Yeah. All right. So it sounds a lot more complex than it is. When we're talking about bilateral, we're just talking about two parties, right? So, like I explained earlier, when we're entering a trade, the trader and the solver are entering collateral into an isolated agreement, right? So into that trade is isolated from everything else. It's not in a pool. We're not taking from pooled liquidity, and so when we mean bilateral, it's one party versus another party in an isolated agreement. And so that trade exists completely by itself, right? So if anything were to happen with that particular coin or go crazy, right? If there's a black swan event, it drops in value or goes up. Just that trade will be affected and not the rest of the protocol. Yeah. So does that explain it, or what was the other
No, I
part?
think that is a good explanation. Now, one thing we were talking about off camera, and you are the head of BD, so I had to ask some BD questions as to like what is BD, because we've only I think had Jack from Masari on here talking about BD. So talk to us a little bit about like what is BD, and then what's your role kind of at Symmio.
Yeah, I mean, so business development, right? I think for me, when I think about business development, it's about It's about finding partnerships that mutually benefit both people, right? So we it's pretty simple. We have a product that we know that works well, that can bring in volume. It's efficient. It has many different pairs. And so for us, like what we're doing, I guess BD is just really trying to find, so like there's dexes out there that have perpetuals, right? But but they don't have 270 pairs to trade, right? Or they don't have a lot of open interest. I mean, liquidity is the hardest thing in crypto, and specifically with futures or perpetuals, is where can we find the liquidity to trade large sizes? And so for us, we're looking at these different dexes or PERT protocols that might have a system similar, like an AMM or an order book type, but they could really benefit from a system like Sim, and their traders could really benefit from that. So business development for me is really about finding, partners or protocols that could, essentially benefit from our technology, and that's really what it's about. It's about finding just a partner that can grow with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess for like, what do I do at Symmio? When I first joined in April, there was two solvers, and my goal was to go out and find more solvers, because for us to grow as Symmio, and just to take a little step back here, Symmio's built for market makers. Like we built this for the market makers. Like the traders benefit from that, but we're really built for the solvers or for the market makers. If you go to a GMX or a Hyperliquid as a market maker, you have to, you use their margin, right? They pick out the margin, they pick out the funding rates, they pick out the markets. Here at Symmio, it's an open protocol. You get to bring whatever markets you want. You get to define how much margin you're going to offer users. You get to find the funding rate. And so, for me and for us to grow is to bring in those additional solvers to open up new markets. So we have a third solver that's going live right now, and they're going to introduce everything on Bybit. So not only are we going to offer everything on Binance Futures, but we're going to offer everything on Bybit. We have another solver who's working on integrating with Deribit. So we're going to offer everything that's available on Deribit, all the options. So now we're going to bring options on chain, and you're going to have access to the same liquidity and options that you could find on that centralized exchange. It's now going to be decentralized and on Symmio.
And talk to us a little bit about like where does one find a solver? It's like where are the solvers at?
Man, that I'll tell you what, that's really hard, because I spoke to basically every large traditional market maker in the space, and one, they're not really caught up on intents and didn't really understand that, and most of them are just looking to market make traditional tokens, or like newly launched tokens, right? They want to go to centralized exchanges and provide liquidity there, and trade on those centralized exchanges. So I met with a lot of these large, traditional crypto market makers, and they were just kind of like, nah, that's not our business. And so, I really went down a deep rabbit hole. I was looking at CowSwap and Uniswap, diving deep into doing analytic dashboards, finding addresses, taking those addresses to Twitter, trying to find information on who these people are and solvers are, because it kind of is private, right? Like it's, at the end of the day, it's really just an address on the blockchain, and there's no identifying information. So it's taken a lot of hours of research and deep diving and just going down different rabbit holes to find different companies who are already, kind of doing solving on those spot exchanges, or finding, other, I don't know, other companies that would be open to the idea of something so novel and new.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I remember I was working for this company, Native. I was writing content for them, and they invited me to a private dinner at Eat Denver, and it was so funny to see the difference between like crypto people and the private market makers that were there. It just looked like a traditional finance, like high frequency trader guys from New York. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's just very funny. Is
Yeah.
that who like a solver typically is? It's like a private market maker.
Yeah, or I mean, it's honestly, it's really up in the air. I mean, anyone could be a solver, really. So we find, yes, there's some traditional market makers who do solving. I mean, if you look, Wintermute is doing, solving for CowSwap and Uniswap X, but also spot intents are really different from what we're doing, right? For us, there's a capital requirement because in spot intents, or spot intent based swaps, there's no collateral there, right? It's just about finding the right route and executing using the trader's collateral to execute the swap. Whereas in Symmio, our solvers have to provide capital because they have to lock collateral on chain against the trader, and then they also have to hedge on a centralized exchange or whatever venue they'd like to hedge that token. So yeah, our solvers are quite a bit different from traditional solvers. So there's a little higher bar to entry, at least for Symmio, but it could really be anyone. I mean, but mostly we find those traders, quants, people that are already active in market making, and that's who we want, right? Because they can start to offer more exotic pairs, more exotic markets. They can hedge in different ways, and that's what we're looking for.
Absolutely. Well, if there are any solvers listening right now,
Hey,
go
contact.
reach out. Go reach out to Jack. Talk to us a little bit about how you kind of envision Symmio contributing to the future of DeFi and broader adoption of decentralized derivatives.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I mean, right? I mean, the fact that we can offer such high open interest on all these different pairs, on these 270 pairs, like I talked about with Radiant, where we have, 3 times as much as Hyperliquid. I think savvy traders are starting to catch on that this is where they can actually trade narratives. Like, great, you can trade like, big traditional Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana on DYDX and, Hyperliquid with major open interest, but if you're a trader, you're really looking for an edge on the market, right? And so you're looking to find these different pairs, or you use pair trading, right? I think a lot of retail has found, they've really fallen in love with pair trading because it helps them hedge their risk, right? When they have a short and a long, and so they're not getting liquidated as much. But the future of Symmio, I think, is continuing to grow the amount of assets we have. So the addition of Bybit is going to be really big. And then when we introduce options, that's going to be really big for traders. And then we're working with some very specialized market makers to bring on meme coins, right? So like newly launched meme coins, like what do those people want? They want to be able to go leverage long, and some other products we're looking at are ways to hedge impermanent loss, right? So going to different LPs and saying, hey, look, you can use Symmio to hedge your risk against impermanent loss. So there's some cool products that we can do, but I think it's really just about expanding what derivatives we have on chain and growing those markets.
Absolutely. And finally, what kind of milestones you guys have coming up online? Then conclude with where people can find out more about you, and if there are some solvers in the audience, where they can find you guys.
Yeah, I mean, the future for us, so some alphas we're getting ready with Intent-X to drop a huge trading competition. It's going to be a 12-week competition coming up here in a few weeks. So we expect to see a ton of growth there. We spent all summer working on our UI, right? Because I think, what we know about traders is traders don't really care where they're trading. They just want, something that's reliable, something that executes, something that's clean, snappy, fast. And our platform earlier wasn't like that. So, I mean, we're competing directly against the centralized exchanges. So, we spent the summer really working on creating some new features like instant open and instant close to give our decentralized exchange kind of more of a centralized feel, so we can execute trades super quickly. And now we're getting ready to launch this big trading competition to bring users in to come try and to really see that, like, yes, we've gotten as close as you can get to matching, a centralized experience on chain. So that's super exciting. Then I guess all these different markets. And then if you're in our Discord, you'll see win. SimTGE is coming. We're planning for that end of the year or Q1 2025-ish. That's not a promise, a guarantee. Could be later. Just got to throw in a disclaimer there. And yeah, and if you want to come learn more about Symmio, you can look us up on Twitter. I think there's a link to our Discord there. And you can also fill out a form on our website, and that goes straight to my inbox. So if you're trying to get a hold of me, find that form.
All right. So everyone, if you feel the strong desire to go spam Jack, definitely go fill out that form, but get involved with them online. Go follow them on Twitter. Go get involved in the Discord. And thank you so much, Jack, for coming on here, and let's continue building the future of Web3.